I am Parul, and this is my submission for the hackathon. Why do so many Kaggle users go quiet, and what might bring them back? So, in this analysis, I utilize the Meta Kaggle dataset to analyze the dormancy and reactivation behaviors amongst the Kaggle users. I particularly analyze those users who have never progressed beyond the platform's entry level stages, which now is denoted by tier 1. The primary reason for focusing on these inactive users is that this is the segment which is most ripe for conversion to the next category. As they say, a community is not just a place, it's a process, and Kaggle is a living embodiment of that. But recently, Kaggle made a major shift in its progression system, and as per the official statement by Kaggle, these tiers never quite lived up to the potential and sometimes led to unfortunate situations where experts in the field were labeled as novices. I believe that these changes are timely and they align very closely with the questions at the heart of this analysis. Why this analysis? Perhaps I believe that this can offer signal that can help the Kaggle team to shape when and how to prompt returning behavior and also identify those users who are still most likely to come back. We start with explaining the virtuous nature of Kaggle community. By virtuous, I mean that each contribution on Kaggle creates new opportunities for others to learn. For instance, users share datasets to initiate a cycle. People use the dataset to build notebooks. Now, these notebooks gain recognition through upvotes by the community members. And because of these upvotes and due to the hotness characteristics, more users find these notebooks and they interact with them. The contributors, they feel appreciated and motivated, and as a turn, new members join and continue this cycle. So because of this very looped design, millions of people have been signing on to Kaggle every year. So much so that the platform has gone from 5 to 25 million users in just a span of 5 years. And it's not just sign-ups, every core activity like submissions, discussions, datasets, and notebooks has also grown in tandem, as can be seen from these graphs. The left one shows the growth every year, while the right one shows the cumulative user registrations. However, if you were to drill down into the data, you still find that most users do not engage meaningfully, which means they just sign and stop. They never submit a notebook, never join a competition, or start a discussion. This quiet segment is the focus of this analysis, which is denoted by tier 1 labeled as Kagglers and comprise of almost 25 million users. The rest of this write-up will look at how these dormant users behave, who returned after a long gap, and what ignited this return. And we might be able to replicate this for all the other users as well. So let's start by understanding these dormant users. Now, there's an important aspect to understand here that becoming an expert in Kaggle takes work, and that's by design. That is why we have a pyramid-like structure, and there are very few Kaggle grandmasters as compared to, let's say, masters or experts. But again, it's still a community, and before users can progress, they need to actually get started, how small it may be. So I utilized the rich activity data to paint a clearer picture. I used timestamps from notebooks, I used timestamps from submissions, forum posts, and datasets to track when users became active, how long they stayed active, when they dropped off. This is important because it helped me track the following 4 things. How much was the time on the platform? Who were the active versus who were the silent users? What kind of unique activity the active users did, and how much time did these users take to perform their first activity? Let's get to each one by one. Time on the platform. It's interesting to note that a lot of users on this platform have been there for more than 1 year, which I term as long term. And very few users are actually the ones who signed just before a month. And this flips a common assumption that most users aren't new. They have been around, but they just haven't crossed the line into consistent participation. So this breakdown might help the Kaggle team to prioritize re-engagement efforts. For instance, users who were active once but stopped are likely more reactivable than those who never engaged at all. Next, I looked at how many Kagglers took at least one meaningful action after signing up. It may be just a forum post, it may be just a comment on a notebook, or comment on a data set, or even an upvote. I split them into two buckets. Users who made at least one contribution, a notebook, a forum post, or a competition submission, or users who signed up and never did anything beyond that, which is demonstrated in this red long bar. As can be gauged from this graph, this is a classic example of the lurker phenomena, which is not just unique to Kaggle, but it's common in online communities. While the platform has a massive user base, only a small fraction is active contributors. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't necessarily negative. Many users might be passively learning or consuming content without actively participating. However, let's look at the bright spot. This also highlights a significant opportunity to convert these inactive users to active ones through targeted engagement strategies. Now, moving beyond, we will only focus on this small portion of Kagglers who did engage, and we shall call them the active group. Because, like I said, getting them to become reactive again is easier than to get this completely inactive group to participate. For this 1.2 million active dormant users, as I would say, because it's been a long time that they have now done any meaningful activity, I looked at what they actually did on the platform. So I broke down the active user base by the types of activities engaged in. And the most common activities are making submissions and making notebooks, which is great because this shows that the contribution is not just posting on forums, but it's meaningful activities like participating in competitions or creating good notebooks. Now, this is a crucial information for understanding what drives engagement and where to focus the resources to support the community. Next, I was also interested in knowing the time it takes for an active user to perform their first action after registration. So if we were to look at this graph, we say that some users jumped right away, right? So these users, just after registration on the platform, started performing some activity. But then there are some people who take a considerable amount of time to get started, let's say 1 to 6 months or even more than a year. Now, this group might be in the learning phase, observing the community before they feel confident enough to participate. So this also suggests that one size fits all onboarding process might not be so much effective here, as people join Kaggle with different levels of knowledge and different levels of contribution in mind. But now we come to the main question. After having gone through this data, we come to this question that we started with. Why do so many Kagglers go quiet? So this data from this session not only shows what is happening, but also gives a glimpse into the why. So based on the observed patterns, there could be several interconnected factors. For instance, passive consumption could be a default for many. They might be using it as a resource, to be consumed and not a community to contribute to. They could be students following a course or professionals which are looking for just code snippets. Another likely reason could be due to lack of early success in competitions or not receiving enough upvotes for their contributions. Now, this could depend on person to person, but for a few people, this could be discouraging. For others, it could just be a matter of motivation. They might have created an account with good intentions but never found the momentum to put meaningful hours into Kaggle. And we know that Kaggle requires a considerable amount of time, energy, and hard work. So now the big question, is there something that can be done to get its users back? Now, it's important to highlight here that over the past few years, Kaggle has tried many things to keep users motivated, which is commendable, like offering rewards, awards, badges, certificates, and so on. However, in this section, let's focus the analysis on one of the most significant events in recent Kaggle history, the introduction of the GenAI intensive courses. So the GenAI intensive course made a lot of splash once they were introduced. And they were introduced in two cohorts, one in November of 2024 and the another in April of 2025. Each cohort included daily readings, podcasts, and coding labs covering all the important and timely topics like prompt engineering, embeddings, GenAI agents, and more. To say that these cohorts were success would be an understatement. The course was so successful and so many people registered that this went on to even earn a name in the Guinness Book of Records. So then the main question here is, can a major learning event like the GenAI course successfully bring back users who have been inactive for a long time? While we know that these courses nudged a lot of first-timers to create their account on Kaggle and participate, our main motive is to look for those dormant users who've been lurking on the platform. To test this, we looked at two important things. Did the activity from these dormant users spike when the course launched? And was their activity directly related to the course itself? Let's see what the data has to say. So we plotted a chart tracking the number of these users who performed their first activity, which could be creating a notebook or making a submission for the first time on a weekly basis, around the time when these courses were launched. So in the weeks leading up to November 2024 and April 2025, we can see two clear spikes. So the moment the course began, it triggered a massive surge of engagement. And the pattern repeated with even greater intensity in March of 2025. So there's a tight correlation between the launching of the course and the user activity for these dormant users. So this makes us believe that the course was the primary catalyst for waking these dormant accounts. But this is not enough. We need more data. So while the spike in the activity was a strong clue, it wasn't enough to prove the course was the cause. It could be just a coincidence. So to be certain that these returning users were motivated by the GenAI course, we needed to look closer at what they were actually doing. So the key was to analyze the content that they created immediately after becoming active. What did they do after becoming active? So for that, we took the list of all the newly reactivated users and cross-referenced it with Kaggle's entire history of public notebooks. Why? Because we wanted to check what were the notebooks that they created, especially what was the title of the notebook that they created upon their return. Remember, these are the users who had registered, but their first activity came around the GenAI courses. The results were definitive. There were about 18,000 notebooks from this group with titles that directly matched to the GenAI course. For instance, keywords like prompting, document Q&A RAG, day 2, day 3, all these notebooks have been created by these dormant members who once registered on Kaggle but then had gone silent. Even more powerful insight comes from looking at the original registration dates of these users. The bar chart shows that the distribution of registration dates years for the dormant users who created GenAI related notebooks. As you can see, this course not only appealed to users who have been inactive for just a year or two, but it successfully brought back users from every generation starting from 2012 all the way to 2024. So our analysis provides reasonable evidence that targeted events like these courses can be effective at re-engaging the dormant users, which is great for the community itself. How we did this? We were able to directly link thousands of created notebooks to the course content through keyword analysis. More importantly, we identified about 18,000 notebooks which was created by the users who had been registered once but had gone inactive. We see that thousands of people who were dormant for a long time not only took the course but also created notebooks. That is, not only they participated in the course but they participated actively. It's important to note here that while this number is a fraction of the total user base, it just still represents a promising and a vital signal. And the underlying message from this analysis is that long-term dormant users are not a lost cause. This playbook could be used to introduce and scale similar programs to reach an even wider audience and bring back more such dormant users into the active user community. This write-up is supported by a detailed database backed notebook which has reproducible code and the entire analysis. Thank you.